Okay, so a school in East Africa had a problem. The problem was that three students started laughing one morning, and by the end of the week, 100 people couldn't stop. Not laughing like something was funny, laughing like they physically could not turn it off. We're talking hours, days, some of them for weeks straight. And when the school finally closed and sent everyone home to try to contain it, the laughing went with them into their villages and into the next town, and then the next school. And eventually, 14 schools across the region shut down for over a year because of laughter. Now, I know exactly how that sounds. Stick with me because this is a real documented outbreak studied by actual doctors and is still taught in medical schools today. Now, they don't completely agree on what caused it, but it's still taught. If this is the type of history no one ever taught you in school, please hit that like button because it genuinely helps the channel and it lets me know that you like what I'm doing. Now, back to the video. So, first, where are we and when? This is Tanganyika, January of 1962, which two things about that. One, Tanganyika is actually modern day Tanzania. And two, January of 1962 was a big deal for this country because Tanganyika literally just gained its independence from British colonial rule that previous December and about 6 weeks before all this happened. What are the odds of that? So you got a brand new country still figuring out what it is, and the school where it started was a product of that old colonial system it had already broken away from. It was called the Kashasha Mission School, a boarding school for girls run by a Christian mission organization in a small village called Kashasha, right on the western shore of Lake Victoria. And boarding schools are pressure cookers under normal circumstances. You're living with the same people 24 hours a day. You can't go home, and the stress of that just compounds on itself with nowhere to go. Now, add to that, these girls were navigating a world that was shifting underneath their feet. New country, new government, huge uncertainty about what their future even looked like. That's a lot of external pressure with no clear outlet. Now that we got that out the way, let's get into the story. January 30th, 1962, three students at Cash Asha started laughing, which on its own isn't weird, right? Kids in school, that's basically their whole point for most people. I mean, that's why I'm making YouTube videos. But these three girls couldn't stop. The laughing went on for hours. Teachers tried to stop them and just couldn't. And here's where it goes from weird to genuinely unsettling. Now, there's four girls in the photo. So imagine that these three were the ones that were laughing, and she just got left out the joke. So she told the teacher. Other students near them started laughing too. Not because something was funny, just because the first group was laughing. Within days, 10 more students was affected, then 30, then 60. By the time anyone had a clear picture of what was happening, 95 out of 159 students at the school were experiencing episodes. More than half the school. And I want to stop here and say something. Because I keep saying the word laugh, so it makes it sound like everybody's been having a fun time, you know what I'm saying? Everything is great. But guess what? It wasn't. Reports from doctors who examined these students described the episodes of laughter and crying that altered, sometimes within the same minute, uncontrollable, involuntary, like their bodies had just taken the wheel from them. Some students fainted. Some had trouble eating and sleeping for days. Some said that the episodes left them physically exhausted, like their body ran through something without their permission. Imagine waking up and feeling like you ran through a brick wall. Shout out to the Kool-Aid man. And here's the thing, it was terrifying to watch if you didn't know what you're looking at, which nobody did, because nobody has ever seen anything like this before. I mean, it doesn't help that it's Africa in the 60s. The school's administrators made the call to close. They packed up the affected students and sent them home to their families, almost certainly thinking that it would stop, at the very least contain it. Newsflash, it only made it worse. The students went home, and in some cases, people in their home village who'd had zero contact with the school started experiencing the same exact thing. Doctors rushed to the region expecting to find something viral, some bacterial, something in the air that would explain why 100 plus people suddenly lost control of their nervous systems. They found nothing, no bacteria, no virus, no contaminated food or water, no toxin in the air. Medically, nothing was wrong with these people. And I want you to sit with that for a second. You're a doctor in 1962, you know what I'm saying? All these people are coming back sick, you know what I'm saying? Can't stop laughing. And you do all these medical tests and you come to find nothing. Meanwhile, it's still spreading. A second school nearby reports cases, then a third. Local authorities starts closing schools, which again backfires because each time students go home, they take the laughter with them. By the time it peaked, the outbreak had spread across multiple districts and affected approximately 1,000 people across the region. Authorities tried everything, reopening schools, closing them, relocating students, bringing in outside medical examiners. Nothing they did worked, it just ran its course. The last recorded cases faded out on their own about 18 months after it started. But then 14 schools had already closed across the region. What actually was it? What do you call it clinically when over 100 people in a region start laughing uncontrollably with no physical cause? Psych ward. The diagnosis that stuck and still holds today is mass psychogenic illness, which used to be mass hysteria before the term got too loaded to be useful in a clinical setting. And I know what mass hysteria sounds like. It sounds like something out of a witch trial. But here's the thing, it's real documented phenomenon that's been recorded for over hundreds of years. The basic idea, the human nervous system is more susceptible to suggestion than most people think. Stress, anxiety, uncertainty, these can produce real physical symptoms, not imagined, real ones. And when you're living in close quarters with other people who are showing these symptoms, your brain can start mirroring what it's seeing, completely without your control. It's the same mechanism behind stress induced fainting at concerts or entire factory floors of workers developing the same mysterious rash with no physical source. These are real document cases, by the way. The laughing wasn't a symptom of a joke someone told, it was a symptom of a nervous system that was overloaded, and then found a way to express that in a form that turned out to be more contagious. Now, why laughing specifically? Why not crying, shaking, or fainting? This is where the story gets genuinely interesting, and this is also the part where the timing matters. These girls were in a boarding school, still running on a strict colonial educational framework. High academic pressure, rigid authority, almost no outlet for stress, and very little control over their own daily life. At the same time, this is the part that gets overlooked. The country around them was changing fast. Independence, new government, massive uncertainty, a lot of external pressure with nowhere to put it. And this matters. The outbreak specifically started inside a school in a tight knit community where everyone watched everyone, not randomly in the general population, which tracks how mass psychogenic illness works. It doesn't hit people equally. It hits people who's already stressed, already primed, already watching each other closely for cues about what's normal. And once it started in three people who were trusted, known members of the group, I guess everyone around them just adopted the brain cell. Your brain is always scanning a room for what's socially normal. That's not a flaw. That's how communities function. But in a closed environment under extreme stress, that future can produce some genuinely wild results. And before you ask, were they faking it? Were they making it up? Was it just a bunch of kids who decided to pull a mass prank on their parents and teachers? The symptoms were real. The exhaustion was real. The inability to eat and sleep was real. The fear that something was happening to your body that you couldn't explain and nobody could fix, that was also real. And it probably made the whole thing worse because anxiety about the episodes itself was feeding on the conditions that were producing them in the first place. These were kids in a high pressure environment in a country mid transition with no framework to understand what was happening to them, and authority figures who were just lost as they were. So, how did it end? And this is actually the most interesting part of the story because it didn't end because anything the authorities did. Every intervention they tried either had no effect or seemed to make things spread faster. Closing schools, relocating schools, bringing in examiners, none of it stopped it. It stopped because the conditions that produced it gradually changed. The acute stress of that first wave of uncertainty eased. The schools reopened and under slightly different conditions. Their original students dispersed and never came back. The last cases faded out about 18 months after the first three students started laughing in Kashasha. And there's no clean ending, no cure announced, no press conference, no official all clear. It just stopped. The Tanganyika Laughter Epidemic, which is what it's called in medical literature, is now one of the most studied cases of mass psychogenic illness on record. And this is not ancient history. Mass psychogenic illness have been documented in factories, schools, and communities all over the world well into the century. The Kashasha outbreak is just one of the most dynamic single cases on record because of how long it lasted and how far it spread. And because it happened at this specific moment, a brand new country, a colonial school system, students with almost no power over their own circumstances. It's almost a case study in that conditions that makes mass psychogenic illness more likely to happen. Three girls started laughing on a January morning. 18 months later, 14 schools had closed. Hundreds of pupils across multiple districts had been affected, and medical teams had run every test they had and came back with nothing. Which honestly says more about the limits of medicine at the time than it does about the people who experienced it. We understand it better now, but the mechanisms that make one person's nervous system reach out and rewrites another person's without either of them knowing is still actively being studied. And I think that's actually the most interesting thing about this whole story. Not the laughter itself, but what it shows us about how we fully don't understand how minds work in groups. Drop a comment down below. I want to know, have you ever been in a room with someone whose energy was so contagious that it just spread to everyone else in the room? The Kashasha students grew up, Tanzania grew up, the colonial school system had them boarding in a pressure cooker while a new nation was being built around them. That became a distant story too. But what happened in those 18 months was started with 3 students on a quiet morning in a mission school by Lake Victoria. It's still being cited, still being studied, and still does not have a complete answer. And I think it's actually a more interesting ending than a solved case would be. The story ended, the mystery didn't. This is the type of history that mostly lives in academic journals and never sees the light of day. So if you got something out of this, send this to somebody so they can think you're really smart. You're welcome. And remember, next time someone starts laughing too hard, walk away. You never know how contagious it might be.